Aggie's brother Bruce was also a groomsman, so there were three.
And Lori. Wasn't it Lori Eliason?
Yeah, Lori Eliason, again a high school friend. Another science major.
And on my side it was Essie, my sister, and my good friend from nurses training, Carol, and Shel's sister, Sean. And then my brother, Dan, was the ring bearer, and Linda, my cousin, was the flower girl. They were 4 and 5 years old. They did a perfect job.
Okay, who made
How
your...
come I had 4 attendants, you only had 3?
You only had 3.
Oh, then Lori was
Jerry.
Lori was a
Okay.
usher,
Usher.
along with
You
Alan
can
Nelson.
see we've forgotten. We need to look at our
Who
pictures.
made your dresses, Mother, and your wedding dress?
Okay, my wedding dress I got at Dayton's in Minneapolis. Grandma was going to make it, but she had a big operation and 6 months earlier and was very worried that she wouldn't be well enough to do it. So I purchased my dress in Minneapolis at Dayton's, but both my mom and my grandma were there with me when I bought it.
Do you remember how much it cost?
It cost $100, which was kind of average for, that is for the dress, not the veil or the shoes.
And how much were you making a month?
Oh, $250 a month, I think. I could have been making a little bit more. When I first started nurses training, I made $245, and when you got word about passing your boards, you got $5 more, $250. And it worked out fine.
And so who made your bridesmaid dresses?
Okay, my grandma made the bridesmaids' dresses. They were kind of a turquoise crystalette, I think.
Alma Hansen.
Alma Hansen was her name, my mother's mother. And she made all 3. She made my bridal dinner dress and my going away dress. I got the material at Amluxen's downtown Minneapolis. Linen coat with a silk lining, and the dress was the same as the lining.
I think Kim wore that, didn't she, at our 50th wedding anniversary?
Good old
Or
Kim.
at a style show,
Or at a style show, I don't remember which.
or women's, yeah.
Okay,
And she even thought it was tight, if you can imagine. I was that skinny. That's eons ago.
so the reception was prepared.
Yes.
No, first we had flowers at the wedding.
Yes, and my great aunt Lena ordered special bulbs
Gladiola bulbs.
because I wanted white, and she was very disappointed that I didn't want colors because her gladiola patch was right on the road where people were going by, and she didn't think it would be very beautiful to see just white gladiolas. But they all bloomed in time, and the florist, we brought all of them up there, and he arranged them in those vases for the front of the church.
They were beautiful.
Yes. She worried all summer that they weren't going to bloom in time. And then for the wedding reception was right at the church, and 4 of my mother's friends did the reception, but Mother had raised chickens that summer, and my grandpa Hansen slaughtered them all, and they made chicken salad, and Grandma also made 400 krumkaka, if you can believe that. And we had little buns, and it looked lovely, just like it was catered by. So you remember, Ruthie? So
And
Shel's twin aunts, Ruthie and Esther, poured coffee, and that's all I remember about that.
What
We
about-
displayed the gifts at the church. People brought all the gifts to the church.
and what about your wedding cake?
Oh yes, my wedding cake was made by the lady at the Chautauqua Bakery, and her daughter was getting married, and she'd ordered a special wedding cake stand, and I was the first one to use all 5 tiers, or whatever they call it. And then also, we had those little mints, kind of like $50 mints.
Mm-hmm.
that were just plain, and she put a rosebud on each one for nothing.
Bargain.
Where did the bride and groom, where did the groomsmen and maid of honor stay?
They stayed at the parsonage because the Maddoxes were gone.
Okay, and so immediately after the reception,
Yes, our car was packed and we took some of our gifts, but not very many.
What kind of car did you have?
We had a Oldsmobile, yellow and green.
54 Olds, whatever model.
And
Was
we
it
took,
decorated?
it was decorated, yes, had signs on it.
How many miles per gallon?
I don't remember, Lucas.
22.
Highway.
And the gasoline was much cheaper. And I just can remember Karen crying her eyes out when we were leaving. Plus the
How
mothers
old
were
was
kind
little
of,
Karen?
she was probably about 12.
Was she in the wedding?
She and Diane passed out groom's cake or something. They had, new dresses that Grandma had made, of course.
of course.
so she was crying because she knew
We were going away and didn't know when we would be back.
Yeah.
for at least a year probably, you thought.
Right. And so, what
And
else?
the reason for that was because I was in the Air Force in tech school in Biloxi, Mississippi, at Keesler Air Force Base.
Yes,
So we honeymooned on the Gulf Coast.
right. Right across the road from the Gulf of Mexico was our apartment.
Nice.
But we couldn't get our apartment till October 1st, and so he had made arrangements for us to stay in this motel. And we had a hurricane, before we moved into our apartment, and the motel wasn't real, it had a tin roof, and it was very
The price
scary.
was right.
It was very scary, and he had to go to work and left me at this place all by myself where I didn't know a soul. But the landlady came over and knocked on the door, and she invited me over to stay with her
Oh, that was nice.
In
until,
a big house.
yes, in a very substantial house. But we were right across, from the Gulf of Mexico, so the water was coming up and the winds were just, it was something.
So Dad was working in the service,
He was-
and you did what?
I did work
She
a little
wrote
bit.
thank you notes for the wedding, is what she did.
Yes, every day I would try and write, because I had lots of thank you notes to write. I did work a little bit as a nurse I took that
Biloxi General, I think.
civil service test or something, and so I did a little bit.
So how long were you down there?
5 months we were there, after we were married.
My tech school was 42 weeks in electronics, airborne electronics it was called, which was good duty.
And we've been married 3 months, and he got his orders to go to Thule, Greenland for a year.
Oh,
That was terrible. I cried every night for the next that he would be leaving.
So that was November, I got the orders, December, January, and I left the first weekend in February.
Right. We had come home on leave a little bit before.
to Chautauqua?
Yeah,
Duluth.
Oh,
Duluth and Minneapolis.
okay.
I roomed with, I had to find roommates again, with Nancy Lee and some of her friends, because one of her friends were going on, she was a nurse too and was going on what did we call it when we went on?
Rotation?
Yeah, some rotation that was, out of rural or something like that. So I lived there for a year.
When I was in Greenland, and we wrote to each other every day.
That's right, but the mail was not dependable. So it would go sometimes for a week, I wouldn't get any letters at all. And then I
And
would
her last
get,
letter to me would say, I hope you're writing to me that day.
I remember you sitting at Aunt Tilly's.
That could
Yes.
be.
Yeah, writing to him.
And then, you know, sometimes I would hear for a week, but then I would get, you know, 7 or 8 letters. I'd have to open them all to see which one I should read first.
Yeah.
And there was no telephone service, of course, except there were ham radio operators. And so if he would go to a special place up there.
We had a Mars station, military, oh, I can't remember, military something relay station. And we could essentially have shortwave communication around the world, and that was one of my responsibilities. So we would go to the Mars station and have it prearranged that she'd be home at a certain time, and then we would connect to a ham radio operator in the Upper Peninsula, and they would collect them to Aggie, and then hook us up. They would be the intermediary.
And you'd have to say over because they were listening into the conversation.
And they'd have to throw the switch, was transmit instead of receive.
And then I would forget to say over sometimes. Oh dear.
We only did that half a dozen times.
Right. And then sometimes we sent tapes.
Did we? Oh, yeah.
Ruthie, remember, and Karen were, I would go in the parlor and
Yeah.
listen, and they would be by the door.
We'd be listening too.
Wait, so did you work then when he was in Greenland?
Yes, I went back to Fairview. There was only one Fairview.
In Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, and worked in Pete's, just like I had before.
Oh, okay.
So,
And what did you do in Greenland then?
In Greenland, I was with the 55th Air Rescue Squadron, and this was a squadron of a couple of helicopters and a tri-fib that was used to rescue any of the pilots that went down either in the ocean or on the ice cap of Greenland. And we had, I had the electronics section that repaired all of the electronic equipment on board those aircraft, as well as the Mars station, as I mentioned. It was a very small section. The squadron itself wasn't that large, except we had half a dozen paramedics who were paratroop trained, medically trained, so if there was a crash on the ice cap or someplace, they would parachute in if they couldn't land and take care of the situation until our rescue teams could get in there.
it was a remote station, so there were no spouses allowed. It was all males. The only woman up there was the Danish.
Well, the Danish, since Greenland is a Danish territory, there had to be a Danish presence, and there was a Danish commander on the base. And his wife and he lived in a small house. There were some women, though. There were some Air Force nurses
Oh, okay.
in the military
But I meant
military
they
hospital,
were up
but
without their,
yeah, no spouses.
And so,
and it was there, it was 6 months it was dark and 6 months it was light, because it's up by the North Pole.
Well, not quite. But you had extended daylight in the summertime and extended darkness in the wintertime. As a matter of fact, since we're above the Arctic Circle, there were days, I suppose around this time of year, in the end of December, when the sun would barely come above the horizon and then fall again. But it was a tremendous base. We had excellent facilities, officers' clubs, gymnasiums, airmen's clubs, a base chapel. I led Bible studies at the base chapel. As a matter of fact, the Lutheran pastor, Lutheran chaplain, said, I really need somebody to play the organ, so I was the organist, if you can imagine that,
Yeah.
for about 6 months, so he could have his Lutheran services. And I directed a small men's choir, my first experience with a military men's choir, and we stayed quite busy. You almost had to for peace of mind.
And then I would bake cookies and send all this stuff, but he would treat everybody else, and he might get one cookie.
Well, it was important that the men have
Yes.
not
their
surprising.
morale high. And they loved Aggie's cookies.
How long did they take to get there?
Oh, I think we got things from Minneapolis about a week, and if the planes could come in, if there weren't a series of storms, which meant that the aircraft couldn't come in through Newfoundland, which is where they landed, and then up to Thule, we could get goodies in about 8 days, 7-8 days.
I would wrap each cookie individually
Wow.
and then put it in a box with some stuff, hoping they would still be in one piece when they got there.
Stamped cookies by Aggie.
No, it was
But
before.
for
This was in the
Christmas-
dark ages.
For Christmas, she sent me a Halverson's
Christmas tree.
Christmas tree. Do you remember those little ones that came in a box? It was an
Wow.
actual treetop from northern Wisconsin or northern Minnesota. And it was put in some kind of a preservative in the base. And it was still nice and green when we got it. And she sent little ornaments with, and I set it up in the corner of my
Cute.
small room,
Oh,
which is about a quarter of the size of this room. And it worked out quite nicely.
And I had a car, of course, and this Oldsmobile. And so I would work every other weekend. So one weekend I'd go to Wisconsin, and one weekend I'd go to Duluth.
And little Karen was delighted when you came home.
Yes, that's
Except
right.
that your mother made her scrub the floors and clean the house good when her big sister came.
I
So-
had to help.
Yes. And,
Oh, dear Ruthie.
and it did.
Yay.
We were hoping to be together for our first wedding anniversary, but it was about a month late.
Well, tell how it happened.
Shel was going to.
Well, I put in for leave. Unfortunately, September was the beginning, was the end of the summer season, and the Army had brought in, starting in June, a number of troops for Arctic training. And so those troops had to come back home again to the States, and consequently the airplanes that were flying out of Thule, the transports, were all full, and it was virtually impossible to get a space available flight on a military flight unless you had orders leaving Thule, Greenland, which I didn't have, of course, just
That wasn't
leave
fair.
orders. So,
So, Mom, on your end,
Also,
how did you
Aunt
get to Pennsylvania?
Shawnee,
How'd you get
Aunt
to Pennsylvania?
Shawnee and Uncle Carl were going to have their second child the end of August. So Ollie had gone out, Shel's mom, to be there when she had the baby, and then Slim and I, his dad, were driving out in our car to meet Shel, of course, and then to take Ollie back with us to back here to Minnesota. Well, we planned our vacation that way, and he drove from Duluth down to Chautauqua, left his car there, and then we took off. We stayed with Willis and Sam in Chicago the first night, and then drove to Pennsylvania. And when we got into Pennsylvania, I said, "Oh, I really want to call and see if Shel's there." He said, "Well, Aggie, if he's not there, then you'll be so disappointed." I said, "Oh, but I just have to know." So I called. No word from Shel. He wasn't there. And so we got there, and he would fly into LaGuardia.
No.
Where was it?
New-
Someplace, some
New
military.
Jersey. McGuire. Air Force
McGuire, how
Base.
could I forget? Okay, so I would call there every day in the morning and say who I was, and they got to know me very well. Wanted to know if Shel's name was on the manifest. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sorensen, his name is not here. So, you know, the first few days, we went in every day, and he didn't get off an airplane. And so I said after about 2 days, no, we're not doing that anymore. That was too stressful to get there. It was about an hour, and he wasn't there. So I just kept calling. Well, Slim wouldn't let me go anyplace, because if Shel should call, we'd have to take off right away. So this was we got there, I can't remember what day. And, you know, a week had gone by, and he still wasn't there. And the day that, on a Friday, I remember, he was going to go on a tour of a zinc mine in Coopersburg.
He being Dad.
Dead, yeah, Slim. And so, wouldn't you know, the minute they had left, Shel called
Oh,
and said that he was, I said, well, where are you? They haven't called me. I'm in McGuire. He came down on, not on a regular,
Shall I
Plane.
tell the story?
yes.
Well, of course, my commanding officer, Colonel Plude, was aware of my situation and the fact that this young lieutenant was trying to get out of Thule, Greenland for a 2-week leave
to see his wife.
to see his poor bride who
Yeah.
he hadn't seen for 6 months. And he finally said, why don't you go over to the officers club, because there are some crews that are going back and forth hauling Army personnel, and I'll talk to one of the pilots and I bet you can get on as a crew member instead of as a passenger. So I went over and he introduced me to one of the captains, one of the pilots, and he said, oh sure, he said, just pack your bags, come on, and you can sit in the jump seat behind us, and you won't be on the manifest then, but you'll be one of the crew members, and as long as you're traveling on leave orders, it shouldn't be any problem. So that's what I did. So I arrived in McGuire as an aircrew member,
And
although
so
I
he
wasn't
never,
rated. I was never on the manifest, so they of course couldn't say, okay, a plane had come in from Thule, Greenland, and they would scan the manifest or the list of passengers. And instead I got off, went to the BOQ to clean up, and called her right away.
and then, but luckily Sean or somebody knew about this number at the zinc mine, and so they got Slim just before he was going into the mine. So and that gave me time to get ready. So it worked out okay.
So they came to get me.
Yes. And since it was summer uniform here, I had to send him his summer uniform. He couldn't change when he got here. I thought, that is the most stupid thing. I had to go to a dry cleaner place and get a big heavy box, and
And he put it on just before he landed, or what?
so he left there with, with that on.
Well, actually I didn't. I left there wearing fatigues because I was part of the crew.
Okay.
But I had it with me in my suitcase so I could put it on, which was one of the reasons why I went to the BOQ.
So anyway, he got there.
Good
and
thing the
then-
plane didn't crash. You never found anyone on the manuscripts.
So then we went to, we had lunch, I suppose, or something with the family, and then we took off for New York City for 5 days.
Just you two?
Uh-huh.
No, we had Grandpa with us.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you still had your
Slim and I went
vacation. You still have vacation left.
Well, I had to call, and Slim did too, and get an extra week.
Oh.
Oh.
So they were very nice about letting me do that.
And then we went from New York to
Washington
D.C.
for a couple of days.
Then we came back and
For the
Sean
last
and Carl
weekend.
put us up in one of the parishioners, Addie's house, wasn't it?
But did she have the baby by then?
Oh, yeah, she'd had the baby already.
Oh, okay.
That was Steve.
Yeah.
And then it was a sad
Oh,
farewell.
it was terrible.
Oh,
But I
And
said,
then-
honey, I'm coming back in just 6 months.
Oh, it was, really, it was about
About
5
five, yeah,
months,
at
yeah.
that point, yes.
And so, and I can remember, you know, since Carl was a pastor, you know, they had, you know, services, so they wanted us to sing on a Sunday night. I said, no way was I could do that. It was too
Emotional.
emotional. Yes. Oh dear. So then when we left, the three of us, you hadn't left yet. They were taking you,
Carl took us. Carl
Took-
took me, I think.
yeah, a little bit later in the day, and we took off, you know, for home in the morning. It was very sad. Oh dear. Anyway, we survived.
Oh, that is a good story.
So that's the dark ages. 55 years
So
ago.
when you came back 5 months later, then
Yes. And he was the last person off the plane because some woman had lost something and he was helping her find it, of course.
typical.
I flew into McGuire and then got on a Northwest Airlines flight into Minneapolis.
oh,
Right, yes.
So,
But the thing was, you know, that's when little Elaine passed away, Bud Navis's little daughter. When I was expecting him to come, I didn't know for sure, but I knew I had to go to that funeral. She was 2 years old.
No.
It was
Oofda.
so sad. I knew that I wanted to go, and I thought, well, I just left word with my roommates if he called, you know, that I was in Wisconsin and I would be back.
I forgot.
So, because that's when you missed it, you couldn't call,
right, yeah.
and you know, the funerals happen
You didn't know
so
how to
unexpected.
text or.
Yeah,
You couldn't email him
yeah.
to his
Did
smartphone.
he come in then, or when you were
No,
down?
I was home.
Oh, okay.
I think it was a day or two later. So, anyway,
So then you lived where then at that point?
then he had orders to California,
Oh, that's right.
so we were home a month, and then we drove out to
Oh,
California.
took us the southern route, Route 66 through New Mexico and Arizona.
Route
because it was
66.
winter time.
It was February.
Cold in line
so
at Kmart. About 66.
California was very nice. That was a
I
plush,
agree. I would agree.
plush Air Force base.
So you got there when?
Hamilton Air Force Base in Novato, Marin County, California.
That's beautiful.
What month and year did you
Well,
get there?
I suppose this was
Marin County
58
is swanky.
March.
Yes, March of 58, correct.
And then you left there?
In March of 61, 3 years.
Oh,
So
It's really snowing.
Got off of active duty, went into the reserve for 3 years, and then that was the end of the Air Force.
okay. So from there, then you lived.
we lived in
It's beautiful.
Chicago.
Chicago Avenue.
Essie and Mo found the house for us
What's it
with
called?
Tony and Lil.
Oh, okay.
Because they
And,
lived just over on 66th and 11th. They had an apartment
Oh,
there. So that was, you know,
66 and
walking
11th.
distance kind of.
Those are some huge.
So,
Was Crosstown there then or not?
no.
No.
And then you had Joy.
Yes.
Joy
Well,
was in
No,
Air
she was
Force.
born in.
Joy was born in
California.
California in
And Shelley?
59.
But Shelley was born in Minneapolis.
I remember the girls with the long golden
Yeah.
locks.
So that's the story.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Well done.